Welcome to the Open Judaism Q+A. Nice to have another opportunity to answer everyone's questions. Just inviting people right now. Just as we're
Go here, start cutting that shit up. Con,
there, we go.
Shalom.
Hey, welcome. How you doing? Shavua Tov and Barach. Listen, before we get started, my wife is going to kill me if I don't mention that I have a Patreon. She's like, you got to mention it this time. I do have a Patreon. Send me a message if you want to know more about it. But if you do like the work I'm doing, feel free to contribute a little something. Anyway.
Just post it in the chat.
Yeah, right? That would be the savvy thing to do.
Shabbat Shalom, Shavua Tov.
Damn, bro, you fast forward a whole week already.
Yeah, we used to
Shavua Tov and
resting over
Barach,
here on
guys.
vacation.
Chodesh Tov.
Chodesh Tov, yeah.
I was reading something.
The moon was amazing last night, man. It was crazy out here.
Oh.
It was a clear sky. It was beautiful.
Is it a hanging crescent by you guys too?
Yeah.
Yeah, we got that nice area. We got Jupiter, from my perspective, we got Jupiter right above the moon.
So it's like exactly how it looks for us too. It was like this beautiful, big, bright star over top of the moon. It was amazing, man.
That's awesome. That's amazing. All right, cool. All right, so what's our questions for this week, guys?
So, what are the mechanics of a drasha?
Ooh, that's a good question. What kind of drasha are you asking about? Are you asking about like the formal rabbinic drasha, or like the one the rabbi gives at the pulpit? Like, what are you talking about?
So yesterday, my Hebrew teacher gave me the opportunity to do a drasha, and I thought it was really wonderful because I haven't converted yet, and they're giving me the opportunity to do a drasha at the Bima. Obviously, I'm not reading from the Torah scroll or anything like that, but just to give my thoughts on the parasha. So I picked Shoftim because it's one of my favorite. Mishpatim and Shoftim are two of my most favorite parasha. Kiddushim is as well. So I picked that, and I just wanted to know, like, typically what goes into it.
Got it.
From that perspective.
All right, so what goes into it is you got to find a little textual nugget in the parasha that raises an eyebrow for you, that has a question mark dancing above it, and you got to explore it. Traditionally, we go and we see what some of the commentators have to say about it. You got your choice of more linguistic commentators, or you have your choice of more midrashic commentators. But the drasha is really going after a lesson or a moral or a message that you're trying to impart. Let me explain to you what drasha, how it fits into the pardes. Hold on one second. So the way drasha works is that you have 4 levels from the Persian period onward. We have 4 levels of interpretation. You have pashat, remez, drasha, and sod, right? So pashat is the text itself, right? And it's the text itself as it exists in the minds of the readers, right? So what that text actually says, that's the pashat. Remez is the hints in one passage to another passage. Okay, so that's remez is like where you have intertextuality, right? Drasha is where you seek out some meaning in the text and you try to uncover more of the characters or uncover more of the drama. It's really, it's almost like fan fiction in a way, because you're seeking out, some element in the text that isn't there otherwise. Right?
Okay.
And sod is sod.
Okay. So is sod more like along the lines of like the Kabbalistic elements, like the mysterious elements of the parasha or the pasuk?
I'll put it to you this way. The best definition of the word sod I ever saw was in this Christian Hebraicist book on Hebrew man. And he related sod. He had some textual evidence for the biblical concept of sod being what's related around a campfire. And I think there's a lot of
So
truth to that.
just like the campfire being like an open conversation with people, non scholarly discussion. Is that what you're saying?
Well, when it takes place among scholars, then it's a scholarly discussion.
Right. So, but in my case, you know, I'm not really. I'm just going up. I'm not really discussing. I'm just kind of explaining, kind of like what this part of Shamit meant to me, or what I got out of it.
Exactly right. So you don't. I just wanted to give you more of the background and context for where Dirasha fits
Gotcha.
into the bigger picture. But for
Hmm.
you got to find those textual nuggets that really speak to you, really bring out the questions that you have, and answer those questions. Well, pick one question and answer it.
Okay. Okay. Interesting. So for me, because I do love Shoftim so much, and Mishpatim Kedushim so much, it's like you're looking at a group of people who are coming out of a bondage situation, and they're being given um, a way of life. You know what I mean? A custom
Yeah.
to live by, and this custom is littered with instructions on taking care of the supporting the Levite, supporting the Kohen, making sure that you're treating your fellow man in a right way, conducting business and conducting your dealings in your community in a righteous way. And it's been codified as a mitzvah or mitzvot to do that. Whereas in other cultures, it's not mitzvot in the context of Torah. It's just something that's kind of expected. So when you have uh, certain things like don't trip, don't make fun of. I'm paraphrasing. Don't talk bad about someone who's deaf. You know,
Yeah.
everybody kind of knows that, but the fact that it's been codified as Hashem saying, "Do not do this." The question is asked, why would he tell us not to do that if by definition we all know that it's a wrong thing? You know, and I guess it's just one of those things where he's telling you, you guys are holy people, you guys will be above all of that, and this will be a way of life that I'm expecting you to maintain, or there'll be problems, so to
That's
speak.
true. That's true, and even more so, by what the Torah does is take ethical norms, takes good common sense, and imbues them with the spirit of the divine will. Right, so that
Yeah.
being a decent person no longer is just a good thing to do. It's also something that helps you develop more in the godly image.
Mm-hmm. Can. Nice. So what I like to do, and then this is all I'll add for now, is when I do my drasha, do typically you write this stuff down on like or type it or whatever, and you're just reading off a paper.
However works best for you to speak publicly. You can write notes, you could write the whole thing out, you could wing it. It's up to you.
Yeah, I definitely don't want to wing it because I can talk. You know what I mean? I'll be up there. Everybody's going to be wanting to like leave. So, but thank
I
you,
hear
Joe.
you. For sure. For sure. Any other questions? Gam. I know Nathaniel had questions, but he's not here yet, so I want to give him some chance to join. You have any questions, Gam? Darius?
Shalom, shalom. No, I wasn't able to write them down, so I'm scatterbrained and doing homework. So
I, That's
I have
all
to wait.
good.
My questions are on
Darius.
Perkei Avov. I was going through Perkei Avov, chapter 1, and I just wanted to know how can we take what we see in Perkei Avov and apply it to community today? Because it seems as though most of what chapter 1 was kind of outlined was the responsibility we have to ourselves to keep mitzvah as well as to the community. So how can we apply Perkei Avot today, and why do Sephardim study Perkei Avot during this time of the year?
That's a great question. Pirkei, I'm actually writing a commentary on Pirkei Avot. I'm compiling a
Could you
commentary of
email it to me?
parallels. When it's more developed, right now it's in its nascent stages, but it's comparing parallels between Pirkei Avot and the Stoic writings, the Stoic sayings. Basically, Pirkei Avot is an introduction to the Mishnah. It's a great question you're asking. How can you make it more communally oriented? It is basically an introduction to the philosophical way of life that is then elaborated on in the Mishnah. So really, Pirkei Avot, you follow the teachings of Pirkei Avot, you are learning how to be a chacham. Just like if you learn Mishle, you're learning how to be a chacham. Mishle and Pirkei Avot go together. Um, it's to make it more communal. You'd have to have the goal of establishing a community, or or at least a dynamic of a community of sages, right? That's the goal, and if you take the stoic approach, it's how to be a sage in the real world with everybody, right, in the messiness of day-to-day life. So if you want to go by extension, to make Pirkei Avot more of a communally oriented learning text, think about how to apply the sages, the sayings of the sages, uh, to the life of a sage in this world. See if you can use them to become more of a philosophical, godly person in this world. And I think that might be the ticket. And just so you know, both Sephardim and non-Sephardim learn Pirkei Avot traditionally during this time of the Omer.
Yeah, I was reading something that I believe the Ashkenazim do it closer to Sukkot or something. I forgot. I was reading through it.
No, it's a very widespread practice to read one chapter a week in the weeks of the Omer. That's when the practice is.
Have you already finished for this year?
Well, I try to read a chapter a day,
Oh yeah, you're definitely
so I've read it a couple times, and I really think Pirkei Avot is very cool, and that's why I'm compiling the commentary on it. Like I said, I think there's a lot of parallels between the sayings of Pirkei Avot and the teachings of the Greek sages, especially the Stoics, and there's a lot of fruitful wisdom to be learned there. Any other questions? Asa L, do you have any questions?
Yeah. Um, what's your opinion on the law about mixing fabrics, the wool and linen? Why is that?
That's a really good question. That's an example of what we call a chok, which doesn't have the same, readily apparent reason as, other, more common sense laws do. We have some laws which are mishpatim, which are very commonly thought of as civil ordinances or rational laws. And those are laws that basically are common among most nations, but the chukim are really only understandable and intelligible if you understand the mission of the nation of Israel. And shatnez, which is what you're asking about, the law of shatnez of mixing fabrics and garments, is an example, a classic example of a chok. And so there's lots of different reasons given for the chukim and the laws of shatnez themselves. What makes most sense to me is that this is basically in combining the vegetable and animal realms. This was a practice that was very popular for the priests of the ancient world, which is the explanation Rambam gives. And so the reasons why we're not supposed to mix them is because it's an unauthorized way. It's an example of the former priesthood that we're trying to escape, and we don't want to bring it into the current practice. We don't want to bring it into the Toraitic practice.
Oh,
So
oh, I'm sorry.
yeah,
I thought you. Go ahead. Can you hear me?
hold on, Laz. Can you put it on mute?
Okay, sorry.
No problem. Asel, does that answer your
Yeah,
question?
because I was reading in the book of Ezekiel how it was talking about um it's funny you mentioned the priest thing because they weren't supposed to wear wool and linen because it would cause them to sweat, and they weren't supposed to be unclean or sweat in the holy place or whatnot, so they were to be wearing all linen. Linen, like a person like me, I like to wear linen when I'm working because it keeps me cool. Wool or that type of fabric, it tends to make me sweat more, and it holds that sweat, and it causes my skin to like kind of be irritated and stuff like that because I'm allergic to my own sweat. So it's funny you mentioned that. So yeah, I
It's
could
very true. It's very true, and it's good that you're highlighting the hygiene aspect of it. The priests were expected, and the Jews and the Hebrews in general were expected to maintain high levels of hygiene. And some of the conditions that are known as sarat, which is mistranslated as leprosy, might derive from living conditions of poor hygiene. So definitely, there's what to learn that way. Also, I appreciate that. Labe, did you have a question?
Okay, yeah. The question is this: I was talking with the rabbi yesterday at Young Israel, and so he was talking about, or we were talking about something that was written by Ovadia Yosef, and he says that you could have one dishwasher for both meat and dairy.
Yeah,
And he talked about like the reasons why and so on and so on. So I said, okay, Ovadia Yosef is a big posek, so if he said it, then that's enough for me to do it.
sure.
And so the rabbi says, oh, well, you have to pick one or the other, like either be Ashkenazi or Sephardi, talking about when you convert. And he's like, the conversion court should have taken that issue up with you. And so I told him, well, no, that doesn't make sense because I'm actually not genetically related to either of these groups of people, number one. And
Right.
then number two, what's the problem with choosing Hilchot just for purposes of convenience like everybody else does? So that's the
Yeah.
question.
Yeah. So what is the exact question?
What's the problem with choosing Hilchot just for purposes of convenience? Because
For
everybody else
convenience.
does that. Question number one. Question number two
Okay.
is, you know, you don't have to. I don't think you should have to choose to be one or the other. You could take some Ashkenazi minhagim and some Sephardi minhagim, and you could like take the best and leave the rest. What's the problem?
So okay, I got you. So people normally cite the Gemara, which talks about not taking the kulot of Beit Hillel and Beit Shammai as a reason not to do so today. However, I think that that's poor rabbinic policy, and I think that that original Gemara was limited in scope. And so basically, I go with what Rav Ovadia was Rav Ovadia Yosef was commonly known to say, which was kochad hetera adif, which is that in most cases, the power of the leniency is preferable to going for the chumrah, even if that means taking the leniencies from multiple approaches and patching them together in a novel solution. So I personally don't think that there's a problem with taking the leniencies of multiple approaches. I endorse it for multiple people. I subscribe to it myself. And I think that as long as it's consistent with the overall Talmudic framework, then it's sensible and it's in line with the Maimonidean approach. I think that if you start playing around with some of the fundamental principles, that's where it gets a little dicey. And if a leniency is derived from, a deviation from a fundamental principle, that could be more problematic. However, getting back to the idea of rabbinic policy, um, I think that basically even an opinion that seems to deviate from the fundamental principles of excuse me the Talmudic system, so long as it's practiced by actual communities, in certain cases, it's reliable, and that's because there's meta principles involved when it comes to Pesach Halacha. And so I think in those cases, you can go with I will personally try to avoid them. But when it comes to giving advice to someone else, I'll sometimes rely on, what is the common practice as a source of guidance. So that's my answer to your first question. Does that make sense, Labe?
Yes, it does make sense. And do you have the source where Ovadia Yosef said that? I'd like to read that or look it
I
up or
can't hear
study
you.
it.
You're kind of breaking up a little
Yeah.
bit.
The source that Ovadia Yosef used about the leniency, I would like to read that source.
The source about which leniency in particular?
No, the source about if you have to take leniencies from different places. It was actually a phrase that you used in Hebrew.
Kochat hetera adif, which is that the power of the heter is preferable. The power of the permission is preferable. Not necessarily the leniency, but the permission. It's better. It's better for a posek to find a way to permit than to find a way to prohibit.
So if I may ask a question on top of that, because I forgot exactly where I read this, but it says, and I'm paraphrasing, you can't forbid what is permitted, but you cannot permit what is forbidden. Like where does that fall? Are you familiar with that, Gil?
Yeah, that's a common idea. Obviously, people are concerned about permitting the forbidden, but not a lot of people are concerned about prohibiting the permitted, forbidding the permitted. So that's also something to keep in mind as kind of maintaining a balancing act in terms of what we are concerned with and what our priorities are. But to get to Labe's second question, yeah, the whole idea that you have to choose Ashkenazi or Sephardi, in my opinion, is completely bankrupt. You should choose what makes sense to you and what is felicitous in the circumstances. Does that make sense, Labe?
Yeah, yes, it does make sense. I was actually trying to find where did Ovadia Yosef say what he said,
I mean,
but it does make sense.
he says it's a phrase he invokes a lot. So you could do just like a search on Yalkut Yosef for Kochat Heteradif, or just do a Google search for Kochat Heteradif and see what comes up.
Well, since we're speaking about Avadia, how is it possible that the chief sage of the time can work for his father while he goes to learn? Isn't that like going to cause the community to falter? Wouldn't that have caused the community to falter rather?
What do you mean?
So at least that's when I was looking at it. I believe that Avadia had to leave. He had to leave school to work with his father because they were poor. But then I believe it was the chief rabbi of that time ended up working for his father so that he could continue to go to school.
No, 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 no. That's not true. It was his teacher. His teacher noticed that he was absent, and he came to his father's job and he offered to work, so that Hakam Avadia could go back to school because he saw that he was, he had a lot of potential. So it was the community coming together to make sure that he didn't have to like basically waste his mind on work instead of getting the foundational education he needed.
Right.
Okay, so that guy wasn't the chief rabbi at the time.
No, it was just his day school teacher.
Okay.
Any other questions? Ariel, did you have a question?
Nah, brother, I'm just here.
All
Hey,
right,
Gil.
cool.
Nathaniel said he's not going to be able to make it. I don't know if you saw the WhatsApp chat, but he did have a really good question. Um, so
Let's
I don't
take a
know if you
look.
want to answer it. Yeah.
Um, yeah, so he says, sorry, I'm missing it today. Hate losing out. Just, I found a way to upload the replays to YouTube. So I'm going to be uploading this replay to YouTube as well. Question for tomorrow from Yeshayahu 66:4, where it says, Ya'an karati we'ein one dibarti velo shemeu. Could this portion of the pasuk be alluding to the midrash that all the nations were offered the Torah, but none of them accepted it? Yeah, I mean that's an interesting read on it, and you definitely could read that into it. Generally, you see that there's a concept in the Bible of God calling and no one answering, or not enough people answering. So there's definitely a theme that's repeated throughout the prophets of, even starting in Genesis, of God seeking humanity and humanity hiding. So we see that popping up in the Midrash and talking about the giving of the Torah and how it was originally offered to the rest of the nations of the world who each refused it for different reasons. But we see it throughout the books of the Bible itself, and God calling to Israel primarily, but to all the nations of the world as well, and no one answering. So I think that there's a lot to be said for that reading. I think that Netanel had a really good idea.
So when was that call made? Because looking at Bereshit, it appears on the nose that this was going in the succession of Adam all the way down to Abraham. So when was and it appears that he was just dealing with a specific family
Yeah.
for the majority of the time. So when would that call have been made after Noah?
Well, after it, like you're picking up on the fact that it's a repeated call. First of all, but second of all, there's two to three different times that the call is made. First of all, Sinai. Sinai was a call to the entire world, not just to Israel, and that's why the criterion for someone being a Hasid of the Umot Ha'olam, a Gentile Hasid, is that they accept the revelation at Sinai. The voice that goes from Horeb is heard by all of humanity. Um, Second of all,
So so you're
yeah,
sorry, just want to pause there. So
sure,
in a literal sense, the entire world heard this call in their own language.
yeah. And it was posted, the summary of it was posted again in all the known languages, on the stones by Yoshua at
Okay.
Gilgal. So, I mean, like, it was really an attempt to establish an international consensus here. So, there's that. Then you have the Nevi'e Israel, right? Some of whom were sent to the nations, like Yirmiyahu, right? And so you have this idea that the Nevi'e Israel, are also amplifying and echoing the call from Sinai. And then you also have this idea that there are also Nevi'im sent to the nations, the Nevi'e Omot Ha'olam. So you also have, Gentile Nevi'im echoing the call of Sinai. So there's a number of times when you've had the call given to all of humanity, and unfortunately, it's been very few that answer.
So because the way that I understood this is that Sinai, all the people that were there, specifically the men, they all had to do Brit Milah so they can do Pesach.
Yeah.
And so they left with Israel. They received the covenant, they received the Torah, and they agreed. So were they not just like Israel? And
You,
would they be considered of the nations? Because I'm
you mean
thinking
like
like,
the Gerei Sedek? You mean?
right. So because I'm thinking like, let's say like in today's geography, we all go to Sinai, and then there's people in China that weren't there. How would they have been
Yeah.
able to fulfill um, all of those qualifications without being present?
Hello, fake nigger Jews. How are we fake nigger Jews?
Hold on one second, Ali. We'll get to your question in a second. Les, do you mind continuing?
So I'm talking about.
Fake Jews, fake Jews, fake Jews, fake Jews, fakers.
Hello.
Okay, sorry about that. Moving back to the audience. So what criteria are you saying that they have to stand in?
Well, I'm just saying that the criteria was to do Brit Milah and to observe Pesach, and and they left out with Moshe and the rest of the people, and then they received the commands. But according to the way the Torah reads, it's like if this person does all these things, you're going to accept them as your brother. You know. So as it pertains to people that weren't present, where did they get the chance to decline the offer?
So you talking about the midrash specifically, like the midrash idea that Torah was offered to all the nations?
Yeah, and I know that a lot
So
of times there's people that say that it was poetic language and things of that nature, but I guess for me, because I'm learning and I'm growing, I'm looking at this from like a very literal perspective. Like, was there a literal call that people would have identified with? Because, you know, I don't know if I'm just kind of talking in circles, but that's just kind of my thought.
yeah, well, I think there was a call, but it was the kind of thing that was not easily understood by the rest of humanity, and the truth of it was easily suppressed by the rulers. The rulers of the imperial states. So you have this idea that Sinai was a call to freedom for the whole world, but that call got muddled, which is why Nevi'im had to be sent to rectify the situation and to clarify the call. So I think that you know it's not a question of do the rest of the world stand in the criteria of the Erev Rav that joined as Gerei Sedek to Am Yisrael, in the Bronze Age when they left Egypt. It's not that's not what we're looking at. We're looking at, does someone today heed the call of Sinai and seek freedom within the will of the Creator. That's the criterion that we're looking at.
So that would just be anybody today that has read this and they say, you know what, I connect with this, I agree with this information, I want to do what I'm learning and
Well,
apply it to my life. Is that what you're saying?
the first step is to subscribe to the opinion that the event at Sinai occurred,
Yes.
that an
Can.
event of importance occurred at Sinai, in which the will of God was made known to humanity in terms that humanity could understand. And how then you understand that's your personal opinion, but that's the core of it. It's understanding Sinai as a real event, that was a real clarion call, that really has a message for every human being, no matter who you are or where you're from or what your preconceived ideas are. That Sinai really speaks to everybody, and that's the criterion for being a Hasid Shalom Olam, a Gentile
Okay.
Hasid.
Beautiful. Thank you.
For sure, for sure. Do we have any other questions? Anybody? Going once? Going twice? No?
Hold on,
Laz?
wait. Before you close, hold
Wait.
on, wait. I definitely have one.
Darius got one.
Yes. So if you were on an island and you were trying to establish a new kahal and you only had three books that you could have, what would be your three sources of Jewish literature to deal with?
Ooh, so the first two are easy. It's the Tanakh and the Mishneh Torah. The third one, I'm going to juke left and I'm going to say the Zohar.
Can I get an explanation for each?
Yeah, okay. So the Tanakh obviously is the matrix of Hebrew civilization. The Mishneh Torah is the textbook to rabbinic culture. And the Zohar is a work of such engaging literature that I think it can stimulate some very productive activity along, implementing along lines of implementing the ideas of the first two books. Does that make sense, Darius?
It does. It does.
That was a good question. I like that question. Um, do we have any other questions? All questions welcome. All questions welcome. Please be respectful. Definitely do not call anyone the N word. That's a big no-no in this Beit Midrash. But all legitimate, good, questions asked in good faith are welcome. So, has anyone got any questions?
No, I'm good.
No. Okay, so guys, it's been real. It's been great. I want to remind everyone that, as my wife asked me to remind everyone, we do have a Patreon. Send me a message about it. It's you can look me up on Patreon, Gil Aminadav. And if you support the work that we're doing here to have good conversation, good discussion, good questions, good answers.
Oh, have you
Um,
made any more headway on your class?
on the Gior class. So I'm still compiling the source sheet. Basically, like I said, the source sheet is going through the use of the term ger in the Tanakh. And I want to really, if you're going to learn Gior from me, then you're going to have to start with what is a ger, and I think that's a fundamental question.
I'm
Um,
with it.
all right, cool. Do we have any other questions before we sign off for today?
Now you're good.
Todab,
All right,
Todab.
excellent, guys. Shavua tov, chodesh
Shavuot
tov.
Shavuot Tov, Ubarak.
All right, see y'all.
Shalom.